Recording in progress.
Good evening, and welcome to the May 28th, 2024 meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. We are in session, and just to remind you that applicants have 15 minutes to speak. If you think you're going to need more, please ask ahead of time, and the board will make a decision about that. If you're speaking to a petition, then 5 minutes. We're going to aim for 5 minutes as the limit. Okay? Okay. The first item of business tonight is old business. A, the request of Atlas Commons LLC owner for property located at 581 Lafayette Road. Whereas relief is needed for after-the-fact installation of an awning sign, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.1251.20 to allow a 32-square-foot awning sign, whereas 20 square feet is allowed. Said property is located on Assessor Map 229, Lot 8B, and lies within the Gateway Corridor District. Is there anyone to speak to this?
Let's see, which microphone? The
You
big
can
one?
you can take that out of there,
Okay,
or you
all
can
right.
use the one on the stand.
All right, perfect. We'll use this one. Thank you very much. My name is Ryan Lent. I own the Tor restaurant, which is seeking the variance. I have my contractor here, Tor Larson.
Can you give us an address, please? Name and address for both.
Home address?
Yes, please.
Sorry, my home address, Ryan Lent, my home address is 2 Alex Way in Stratham, New Hampshire.
Okay.
And I'll let Tor speak to that when he
Okay.
comes up. But before Tor presents, I just wanted to apologize for missing the last meeting, and I truly appreciate the postponement. So thank you very much for that. And Jillian, you've been wonderful. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Tor now for the proposal.
Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Tor Larson, 7 St. John, Dover, New Hampshire. We're here because before we met, he had hired another company, and he was under the impression that they were doing everything logistically, which we found out later they were not. So, at no fault to our own, the size of the golf and grill writing was larger than it was supposed to be. And it's already been put up. It's only 12 square feet larger. At the time, we'd like to ask for the variance due to the fact that to change it is going to be substantially thousands of dollars to remove the fabric, take the awning down, repaint it, and put new writing on the awning itself. Due to the fact that we're so far from Route 1 and our neighbors, we don't think that that's going to cause any issues or any contempt against or aggravation for anybody in the abutting properties, you know. It's non-lit. It's just a simple painted black and white, classic, nice, clean look for it. Yeah, that's about it. We still are very under the size allotment for all this wall signage for the building as well, as he's allowed 200 square feet, but we're much smaller than that, so we're hoping that you allow us to keep the size that's there, and he can put the money into his business and, you know, his employees and everything else, and keep going with the community and put the money towards something better than just changing the size of a couple letters.
Would you like to speak to the criteria that we use to make our decision? Do you have a copy of that?
Oh, you just want me to just read the?
If you would like to tell us why you think that we should
Yeah.
approve of you.
We are here now asking due to the circumstances of the hardship, replacing such an awning would be an unnecessary cost, thousands of dollars at the time. Cost-wise for our client, this economy, we ask that the variance be allowed to keep the size that was installed, 10.233.25. The neighbors will not be harmed, nor will property values, assets be diminished from this black and white classic non-illuminated lettering. Also, it may actually help the wayfinding point for travelers passing through or for direction purposes in an already busy intersection, 10.233.24/21. The awning size is just a minor bit larger than the allotted size. We hope due to the distance of our neighbors and the viewing capacity that you allow us this variance to keep the awning as is. We will not enlarge or change what is there, and will observe all aspects of allowed variance 10.2 233.22. This will help our client to continue his endeavors focused on creating amazing restaurants and event places where we can gather and grow our community, 10.233.23.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Yes, Mr. Rossi.
What's the sort of the service life expectancy of the awning?
The awning that was provided is of good quality. The paint is the lettering on it, so it's an oil-based paint, which is very strong. So it shouldn't chip or fade or look distressed at any means in the new future.
Would you be able to put a number of years on it, or, you know, are these good for 5 years, 10 years, 100 years, 2 years?
Without making it myself, I'd say if they primed it and did the 3 coats of oil paint, as I typically do, it should last, 10 to 15 years.
Anybody else question? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this petition? You may sit. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Is there anyone who would like to speak to, for, or against? All right, then the public hearing is closed. And we would like to,
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the requested variance as presented and advertised.
is there a second for Mr. Ram's motion?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Right, I'll just get right into the criteria. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. So a couple things with this property. As the applicant has noted, their overall total amount of signage on this particular facade is not anywhere close to the maximum. This particular entryway, I think, is a very wide entryway. It's got, sort of a 4-door cross look, plus then sort of the panels on either side. It's not surprising that the awning that was put up, to be proportional to the size of the entryway is as big as it is, and then the particular lettering on it is reasonably proportional to the overall size of the awning. It provides some important supplemental information to the name tour that the applicant has. So in terms of what the ordinance is really looking for, we don't want to overburden any particular facade with a lot of writing and information, awnings in particular. Don't want a lot of illustration and whatnot, but although this ends up being 32 square feet, I mean, the letters, there's actually a fair amount of distance between the letters. It's not like it's imposing with all kinds of graphics and other things. It's relatively tasteful and really in fundamental compliance with what the zoning ordinance is looking for. The general characteristics of the neighborhood, there's nothing here that would be counter to that. There's all kinds of other businesses along this strip that all have signage of various sizes and types. This is not in any way excessive or out of the expected ordinary. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. Again, there's really nothing that the public has for a significant interest here that would outweigh the applicant's desire to have this information about the nature of what tour means, the Golf and Grill, that's kind of a unique concept that the applicant has put forward for the nature of their business. So it's useful information, and there's really nothing the public would find necessarily offensive about what's being put in that would say it outweighs the applicant's desire to provide that information to their potential clients. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Again, this is sort of the end of a commercial district. There's some residential behind it, but there is, signage of all different types running up and down the length of Lafayette Road in this adjacent area. This is not anything that, in and of itself, the fact that this is just a small amount larger than what is required is not detrimental to property values. And then lastly, what we commonly call the hardship criteria, but basically why is this property unique and deserves to have exception to the zoning ordinance, what makes it different from some of the other properties. Again, I think the unique size of the entryway to this particular property, it was previously a different business that was in here many, many years ago. It was, as Mr. Mann will remember, a movie theater. Not sure if it actually shared the same door, but and I saw the Muppet movie there when I was a kid, so but overall, it's got some the unique characteristics of the doorway, the overall signage configuration, the nature of the business that's in here. I think all of that contributes to some unique aspects to this that says that strict application of the ordinance to this particular property does not make sense. So with that, I recommend that we approve it.
Does the second have anything to add?
I would just add for the hardship, this particular parcel on the end of the Gateway District is where it's located. The Route 1 bypass starts to curve away from it with a green grass buffer that sets it back further so that Lafayette can split off of the bypass. And so the small amount of increase in sign coverage that went over what is allowed is understandable.
Okay. Is there any discussion before we vote? Yes.
I won't support this motion. I'm troubled a little bit by the applicant's claim of a hardship is the fact that somebody put in a non-conforming sign and could potentially incur costs if we enforced the zoning ordinance. I also find that I'm not entirely convinced by the arguments on what the special conditions of the property are. They're not terribly different from any other building along Route 1 along that line. You could make the same argument for a larger awning sign for almost any of those buildings if you use that argument. Thank you.
I'm going to speak. We have, in fact, used that argument for other buildings, such as hotels that are off, major highways. And I think that the same condition applies, for me, the same condition applies here. It's a very busy intersection. And it does cover the doorway. And you're right, it's not a hardship if it's going to cost money. But we know better than that. And I guess I don't think that there is any damage to anybody else. And I think it will make it easier for people who are intending to go there.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would just add, we did, neither myself nor the second mentioned anything. I agree the applicant tried to make that as a condition for hardship. Unfortunately, our criteria, the way it's worded, if you don't know really what the true nature of the law is, then it does sound kind of confusing. And we often hear economic arguments for a hardship. That is not a hardship for the criteria that's put forward by the courts. And I do think there are other aspects to this property which are in fact true hardships that supersede what the applicant was making for an argument here.
Any other comment? Yes, Mr. Rossi.
For what it's worth, I am generally quite opposed to sign exceptions because I really don't want Route 1 to end up looking like the gateway through Pottersville. I'd really like to maintain, a decent and subdued atmosphere as much as possible in accordance with the ordinance. I also generally am not sympathetic to after-the-fact variances when the result was an error from a contractor. I also don't buy the economic hardship argument because I do believe that the applicant would have recourse to go back to the original contractor and have them bear the costs of any required changes. Having said all that, I drive past this intersection almost every day, and I don't find this particular sign to be objectionable. I never would have known it was out of conformance if this hadn't come forward, so I will end up supporting it.
Okay. Are we ready to take a vote? Okay. Ms. Recker?
Yes.
This is the old seating chart. Mr. Neese?
No.
Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
Mr. Ram?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, and you are approved.
All
6-2. 6-2.
You're welcome.
Voted no.
Okay. The next item of business is, and I had a hard copy, just let me check this. New business, A, the request of Sac and Chalala LLC for property located at 235 Marcy Street, whereas relief is needed to demolish an existing one-story addition and reconstruct a two-story attached garage addition on the rear of the existing residential structure, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.521 to allow a 7-foot left side yard for the addition where 10 feet is required. And 2, variance from section 10.321 to allow a nonconforming structure or building to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 103, Lot 12, and lies within the general residence B and historic districts. Is there anyone to speak to this petition?
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. Chris Mulligan from Boson and Associates in Portsmouth on behalf of the applicant, Sakuntala LLC. With me is Shiva Nanda, who with his wife Elizabeth are the principals of Sakuntala. Also here tonight are Bill Bartel from CJ Architect, the architect on the project, and Eric Weinrib from Altus Engineering, who prepared the site plans that you have before you this evening. So this is obviously a very old home. It's in the historic district on Marcy Street. I'm sure you're all familiar with the location. The applicant acquired the property last fall and is planning on substantial upgrades and renovations to the property. It's essentially a bit of a time capsule and has not been actively worked on for many, many years. The applicant's program includes replacing the existing asphalt shingles with period-appropriate clapboards, replacing the existing roofing, restoring the windows, replacing and restoring trim, adding gutters, adding corner boards, etc. In addition to all of that, the applicant would like to add a new addition with a covered garage attached to the main historic dwelling structure. The property as it stands now has an existing addition that is essentially a shed that is a single story attached to the main historic structure. The shed addition is substantially substandard and of very little utility to the applicant or any owner of the property. It has no heat, no insulation, no foundation, etc. The plan and the proposal before you is to remove that existing addition and replace it with a two-story, 390 square foot garage addition. The property is unique. It is a narrow, small, narrow property. It actually tapers to become even narrower as you go into the depth of the property. The existing main dwelling violates the front and side yard setbacks. The property doesn't have the necessary frontage or lot area for this zone. Those aspects of the main dwelling are not going to change, so no relief is required. However, because we are removing or proposing to remove the existing shed addition, which is non-conforming as to the side yard setback at 5.1 feet from the left sideline, we're proposing to replace it with an addition that is at 7 feet from the left side yard sideline. 10 feet is required in this zone, so we need relief from the left setback requirement. Again, this is a long and narrow lot that squeezes the available building envelope significantly. The existing structure is already impeding or impinging on the side yard setback. The replacement structure will actually be an improvement and will be more conforming, which is something that I think your zoning ordinance is supposed to encourage. And significantly, abutting properties to this one have structures that are built right up to the lot lines. So there are significant nonconformities to the structures and to the structures around it, and it is a very small lot. The new addition that we're proposing will be less non-compliant than the current one. That's the overview of the project. Now I'll address the 5 criteria necessary to grant the variance. The first 2 are considered together. These are granting the variance will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance, nor will it be contrary to the public interest. Here, the board must determine whether or not what's being proposed will alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Here, the essential characteristics of the neighborhood as a residential neighborhood and a dense residential neighborhood will not be affected at all. This is entirely in keeping with the neighborhood and the properties surrounding this one. The existing structure in the lot are already non-conforming and non-compliant with the left side yard setback. This actually improves that slightly. And as I mentioned, 2 of the neighboring properties have 0 setbacks that impact this property. The essential character of the neighborhood will remain as is. Health, safety, and welfare will not be threatened in any way. The existing nonconformities have existed for hundreds of years and have not negatively affected health, safety, and welfare. The next criteria is substantial justice would be done by granting the variance. Here you have to balance the loss to the applicant if you were to require strict compliance with the zoning ordinance against some gain to the general public. Here, there is no gain to the public in denying the variance that's not significantly outweighed by the hardship upon the applicant. The main house already encroaches into this left side yard setback, and what we're proposing for the addition will be more compliant than the existing addition. The nearest affected neighbor has a garage with a 0-foot setback right up on the lot line. So the applicant's proposal, which will give the property some significant benefits in terms of additional usable space and attached garage, is a benefit to the applicant that far outweighs any loss to the general public. Values of surrounding properties will not be diminished by granting the variance. Quite the contrary, this is part of a substantial upgrade to this particular property, which will effectively modernize it and increase its value. We're moving into closer compliance with the zoning ordinance as a result of what we're proposing, so values of surrounding properties will not be negatively affected in any way. Then finally, special conditions associated with this property which prevent the proper enjoyment of it under strict terms of the zoning ordinance and create an unnecessary hardship. We've already talked a couple of times, but this is a small, narrow, irregularly shaped lot that's non-conforming as to almost every dimensional requirement you can name. Lot area per dwelling, frontage, front and left side yard setbacks, etc. It's surrounded by, or it's abutted by properties that have structures that are right up on its lot lines, and the built environment that we're working with includes this substandard addition that has no insulation, no foundation, and is really not useful living space. So those are special conditions that are present on this particular property that are not present elsewhere. And the use is a reasonable one. It's a residential use in a residential zone, and there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the side yard setback and its application to this specific property. Again, and I apologize for repeating myself, but the existing main dwelling is already at, I believe, 2 point something feet off the lot line, so that is extremely nonconforming as it stands, and the addition that we're replacing is more nonconforming than the one that we're proposing. So there's no fair and substantial relationship between the left side yard setback and its application to this particular property. So in my opinion, we meet all the criteria necessary for granting the variance, and we hope you agree. If you have any questions for me or the team, we're happy to answer them.
Any questions, Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So looking at your drawing A1, which includes the floor plan, the new addition is proposed to be 22 feet long along the left side yard, which is the one where the variance is required. Looking next down on page 25 of our packet on drawing S1, I couldn't tell anywhere what the existing addition has for a length. Do you have that dimension?
I believe Eric can extrapolate from his plan.
Okay.
Page 26, you'll see the overlay. See the dotted lines.
Yeah, it's a little bit longer.
It is a little bit longer.
Trying to figure out what that dimension is.
Exactly how much I eyeball it.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean for this to be a advanced placement calculus final exam, but and my only other question on C1. Well, all right, looks like we have the answer.
Eric Weinberg, Altus Engineering. It's about 18 feet, so it's about 4 feet longer.
All right, so there's a 4-foot difference. And then on C1, which is the new plan, that's our page 26 of our packet. I just want to validate, there's quite a bit of additional new driveway that's being put in here, which would be considered counted against the open space, from what I can tell. You guys have calculated that still at like just under 31% open spaces. That doesn't include having that driveway space being expanded upon, 31%?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I'll stay up here.
All right, thank you. Yeah, you must have had to get out your like special slide rule to calculate all those little spaces to figure out your 30.8%.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Rossi.
So the planned addition, obviously, since the current addition has no foundation, there's no question about reutilizing what's there. So the planned addition is kind of slid over somewhat to the right side of the property, but there's room to go even farther before you encroach on the right side setback. So why is it that the property, that the addition can't be built that way? What is it about the property that prevents you from doing that and not encroaching as much on the left side?
So what we're providing on the right side is about 12 feet of space between the property line and in the building. And there's 14 now. We are shifting it over a little bit. We're trying to leave enough room for a driveway to come into the back. And our land goes a little bit beyond, I'll call it the line of occupation with the fence. So we're not trying to go on the other side of that fence, and we're building a small retaining wall on that right side. So we didn't want to push further over and encroach into the area that is our client's property, but also being used by the abutting property. We didn't want to move in that direction. So we stayed over, left enough room for the driveway, so you can pass a car on that corner, in that pinch point.
And I think if to the extent your question is why isn't the proposed addition longer into the rear of the property and then sort of off of the left side yard setback, was that what you were?
Well, my actual concern is that across the other side of the left side property line, there's this very small courtyard. Currently, even though you're closer to the left side property line with the addition than you will be with the new addition, the new addition is 2 stories tall, am I correct? That's correct. And so that little courtyard, which is on the northern side of that addition, I'm just concerned about the blockage of sunlight into that courtyard by a 2-story addition that's not placed as far as possible from the left side lot line.
Well, I mean, I suppose that is a potential concern for that property owner. In my experience, in my opinion, property owners in this particular part of Portsmouth have to understand that they are living in very close proximity to their neighbors, and structures are built very, very close to lot lines. And to the extent that they are losing some of the light and air they otherwise would have gotten because this is 2 stories, I think that's kind of part and parcel with what goes into owning property there. I mean, if you notice, the garage on the abutting property behind that goes right up to the lot line. And, they've managed to enjoy their courtyard, I suppose, given that encroachment. So
Yeah, it's interesting because the garage that you're referring to is really to the east, kind of northeast of that little courtyard.
Yep.
And as such would not be casting a shadow for as long throughout the day as on the northern side of the addition that you're talking about. Generally, the sun is going to beat down on the southern exposure, right? And that means the shadows will be cast along the north. I think it's not just a question of whether the neighbors are concerned. It's really the spirit of the ordinance and why we have setbacks, particularly around light and air issues. So it is of concern to me. And I just looking for a rationale as to why this could not be either longer and narrower or slid over a little bit more than it is.
I think sliding it over a little more would make a very difficult drive aisle to get in and out. The way this is configured, a motorist will have to drive in, go out to the back of the driveway that you see here, and then back into the garage bay, and then reverse that process to get out. So if we were to shift it over to the right, I think we would have a very limited and probably not terribly safe driveway configuration. If we were to skinny it up and extend it, then the driveway configuration would take up essentially all of the green space in the backyard. So I think there are good design reasons not to do it that way.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Mann?
Is this a 1 or 2 car garage?
One.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition?
There's one attendee online.
Okay, is there anyone, is this in favor? I'll do this first. Is there anyone in opposition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against? Okay, we do have someone online.
Fred Orlando. Go ahead.
My name is Fred Orlando. I'm one of the abutters. I live on Gate Street. My property appears on the map you just showed. My question is, we're speaking of a garage, but this is a 2-story structure. Is it simply a garage, or are we talking about a garage with living space above it? And that's question one. Question two is, what is the justification for 2 stories? Because we're concerned, about encroachment of visibility and sunlight, and even our view of the schoolhouse and such. So I I understand a lot of the discussion had to do with the footprint and vertical and horizontal dimensions, but I'd like to hear more about the reasoning, the justification, and the intended use for the extra story of height. Thanks.
So there is living space above the garage. There's a bedroom. If that helps.
And is that in compliance with all ordinances, or does that require any special
Because
variant?
the fact that there is a bedroom there does not, no. No.
And the actual height of the structure compared to what's there now, is that
It
in
meets all height
in compliance
requirements.
with what's allowable?
It meets all height requirements. It is not as tall as the building in front of it.
Oh, it's the same.
Bert Wartell?
Yes, good evening. I'm in a butter as well. I'm on 245 Marcy Street. I would really like to see, with my wife, to look at the drawings of the proposed structure to see how this is going to look. And we're recently new to the neighborhood, and we purchased based on the existing layout of the buildings in the neighborhood, and would like to keep it the same as how we purchased it. And I mean, there's a reason why we purchased in a historic district, so we'd like to keep it that way, and we'd like to see what exactly is being proposed before any construction takes place or before this is approved.
The plans for this project have been available online for the last.
Okay.
And I understand that's not like coming to your door and saying, here it is, but in the future, whenever something is coming up at a public hearing, the plans are available.
Okay. So we'll have to look into that.
Not if this is approved tonight.
They'll still be available.
Yeah, they'll still be available. They'll still be available. And if you have been watching this, they have been on the screen, but I don't know how easy that is for you to see. But they have been put up.
I've been trying to take snapshots on my phone, but you're moving through them way too quickly.
Okay. Anybody else?
I don't see any more hands online.
Okay. Then the public hearing is closed. And it is with us.
Well,
Mr. Rossi.
I remain concerned about the impact on light and air and the neighboring property, marked 103-11 on page 26 of our packet. I think that having a two-story structure that close to the lot line is actually more problematic than having the one-story structure as it exists today. So I'm not, yeah, I think that's a problem.
Okay.
Just weigh in. I have some competing thoughts, I guess. Is in one regard, I think it's great that this property is getting improved. Aesthetically, it would be better for the neighborhood and the character. I was originally wondering about how the car would get in and out of the garage, and upon that explanation, I can see why the proposed addition is cited the way it is. I think it's a good thing that it's becoming closer to conforming, but then again, whenever it's a new construction, ideally it would just be conforming. However, I do see the special condition of this property with its narrow width at only 40 feet, which is half of what's allowed, and then with the 10-foot setbacks on either side, it's a really small buildable envelope, which is kind of driving a lot of these problems. So, yeah, I'm just weighing those factors.
Anybody else over here? Mr. Ram?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, a few thoughts on this. One, this is a classic example of what happens when you create a historic district commission and put the houses into the historic district. It becomes brutally expensive in many ways to renovate a property. So you see these properties that essentially have nothing done to them for decades, the asphalt shingles here being our first major clue that there probably has not been anything done to this property in a long, long time. Simply because for many of the homeowners who suddenly found themselves in a historic district, it simply wasn't an economically feasible thing for them to go and do. So they continued to live in their properties the way they were. They continued to deteriorate, and then it takes somebody else coming in that has the means to be able to go and renovate the property to the level of satisfaction that the historic district wants. So we've seen these neighborhoods being transformed. It's worked out great for those who are early adopters in the neighborhood. They probably made out quite well on it. Outside of that commentary, I personally have no idea. I would not want to put a garage in the back end of this property. You essentially lose your entire backyard. Not sure why you would want to do that. Is really having a tiny one-car garage that important? Again, that's not our purview, perhaps. That's the applicant's decision, whether that's really the trade-off that they're looking for out of their property. Does seem like an odd thing to go and do. But I really do think that the configuration that the applicant is asking for here is really being driven not so much by the garage, but actually by the second floor. And if you look at the second floor plan on page 24 of our it really sort of sets up with, what you want for your modern bedroom suite. You need to have the decent sized master bath. You want one or more walk-in closets, and you want to have substantial room for a king-size bed, right? That's the standard that we now expect. And I think with that, that's probably really sort of driving what the what's being asked for here. In terms of the height, I fully agree with Mr. Rossi. It's probably going to be an impact on the neighboring property. I guess the fundamental question before us, not so much is a two-story addition going to be a negative impact on the property, but is a two-story addition that is 3 feet closer to the property line going to be a significantly increased impact on the neighboring property? And that's really what it comes down to. The applicant, as they pointed out, they are making an improvement in the setback. That said, it was to a very relatively modest one-story addition to now a more substantial two-story one. Is the 3 foot closer to the property line than what is allowed by the ordinance going to make a significant impact on the neighboring property? I think that's the fundamental question before us. My initial instinct is probably not, but that I think that's the fundamental crux of our decision point here.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Neese.
I guess I'm, give me just a second here. I guess I'm not as concerned about the impact of the building on the next door patio with sunlight. It appears to me that, yes, it probably will have an impact early in the morning, let's say up till about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, given the direction of the sun as it moves across and the shape of this. This house is almost the same direction as my house is, and so I kind of know how the sun moves at this time of day. And so I think that patio probably by noon or a little after noon is already in the shadow of the main house. And I'm not convinced that there's a significant difference by adding this two-story addition on the back and how often or how long that patio will be shaded. I concede that there's probably some in the morning, but I'm not sure it's a significant amount.
Okay, thank you.
I would just further add to my earlier comments that I don't feel that we are compelled to come up with an alternative solution that avoids the problems that I see on this particular proposal. And I don't take it as a fixed given that the addition has to be the exact square footage that it is currently proposed to be. nor any of the other factors that are causing concern here. So for me, I haven't heard anything that convinces me that this observes the spirit of the ordinance with regard to light and space, and I can't see supporting it.
Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion? Anybody?
Go ahead.
Sure. I'll make a motion. I move that we grant the variance for the application as presented and advertised. And if I get a second, I
Is there
will.
a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Moving through the criteria, I don't believe that granting variance will be contrary to the public interest. It will not offer, and it will not change the essential characteristics of the neighborhood. This is a neighborhood with many small lots, with many smallish buildings that are right along property lines. Most of these buildings have very limited setbacks in this residential area. I don't see any public benefit that accrues by denial. I don't think there's a significant impact, likely to be a significant impact on the light and air of the property next door. It arguably creates a slightly more compliant property by increasing the setback on the left side a little bit. I think that granting the variance would do substantial justice. It will help the applicant get rid of what is, when you look at it, a decrepit structure that is probably not very useful. I don't know how you can have a structure with no heat, no foundation, no walls in New England and say that it's terribly useful. I don't think that there's been any evidence that will have an effect on, it will diminish property values. I think there are several specific conditions to this property that are different. It is a very small lot, which many of these in this area are. When you look at the required setback boundaries, it creates a very narrow footprint where the building could be allowed that it complies with the setback. As noted by the applicant, there are issues on the right side of the property, the desire to have a driveway on a street which has no parking on that street. So the desire to have a driveway and the ability to have the driveway necessitates keeping a certain amount of space on that side. There's a substandard structure that's attached to the building, which frankly is probably more of a hazard to the public than what it will be, hopefully what it will be replaced with. Based on these specific conditions, I don't think there's a fair and substantial basis for applying the provisions of the ordinance to this property, and therefore literal enforcement would result in enough necessary hardship for the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Does the second have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just say, I mean, the hardship criteria, what is unique about this property, long and narrow. I do think the fact that the existing structure is situated for many, since it was constructed, all the way to one side. It's a pretty common occurrence in many properties all throughout Portsmouth. We have seen additions onto the back ends of those. This is really, from a general public purposes standpoint, the addition is not going to be not visible really to any great extent. Would look ordinary. It really comes down to this, the imposition to the closest neighboring property. Again, is the 3 feet. It's sort of being driven, I think, by two things. One is the desire to make this a garage. Basically, with property values being what they are, when people move into these homes and do renovate them and spend that money, they're going to want the modern conveniences of a garage and a modern master bedroom setup. And I think that's driving some of this. And is there really that big of a driver that says, that additional 3 feet is going to make a significant difference? I just don't in this particular instance. Every case is unique, but I think that this particular one, the imposition is not that great. The nature of the long, narrow property, odd property lines, and the situation of the building off to one side makes a modern addition to it difficult to be in full compliance with the ordinance.
Is there any further discussion? I'm going to vote in favor of this ordinance because I think, as Mr. Rayam said, it really is about those 3 feet. And but for those, this wouldn't need a variance. And I just am convinced by hearing about the story of the sun going around the earth that it isn't going to make that much of an impact for most of the day. So, if there's no further discussion, we will vote. Ms. Record?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Mr. Rayoon?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Nope.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You're approved. Okay. Okay. So, the next item of business is the request of Colleen M. Cook, owner, for property located at 40 Winter Street, whereas relief is needed for the following: variance from section 10.515.14 to install a mechanical unit 3.5 feet from the side property line, whereas 10 feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 145, Lot 96, and lies within the General Residence C District. Is there anyone to speak to this?
So I am applying for a variance to apply.
Name and address, please.
Oh, Colleen Cook, 40 Winter Street, Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Thank you.
And I am applying to put mini split ducts in my house to update my heating and cooling. The reason for the variance request is that I'm on a pre-existing non-conforming lot, looking for the words. And there are very limited spaces and options, and as I'm sure you guys are quite familiar in Portsmouth houses, there's windows and doors and things that make it very difficult to find a space to put the split ducts in, because there literally is, this is the only space in my house that it can go in. So in terms of the criteria, it will not be contrary to public interest. There's already a fence up where it will be, so no one will actually even be able to see the unit that will be there. And so that is, it's not contrary to public interest because it will be hidden. It's in the spirit of the ordinance. Again, it is undetectable to neighboring properties, making it an optimal location. It's also consistent with section 10.122, which speaks to the commitment to sustainability and environmental issues, which this will provide a substantially more energy efficient and environmentally friendly means of heating and cooling. Criteria 3, justice will be done in that the space will be the least intrusive location, will hide the main unit from the public view and the view of neighbors, and again, will not diminish the view of any surrounding properties because it's behind a fence and no one will actually see it. I've lost my place here. And I think I did 4. But some of them seem repetitive to me. But if I didn't do 4, views of surrounding properties will not be diminished, again, because behind the fence. Criteria 5, literal enforcement will result in unnecessary hardship, as this is a pre-existing non-conforming lot, leaving essentially no other reasonable options for installing units. Other locations will not only lead to, well, there really aren't any other locations, honestly, in the house, but other locations would also, lead to limited, unusable space of the limited options available on the lot, and will increase inefficiencies of the system because it's a small existing lot with limited space and options. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes. Yes, Mr. Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you have a little bit of information. I'm looking on page 32 of our packet right now. You have I'm presuming that's your handwriting. You have very interesting handwriting.
I do.
Your
Graduate
B's,
school destroyed me.
your B's are kind of like reversed L's. They're kind of interesting. But I did figure it out. So I just want to make sure that we're granting you what you need for relief. So the condenser that you have, you're only asking for about 6 additional inches from the side of your house. Do you know, because there is typically like a distance that a condenser needs to be
And
from
I
from the house?
called, or I talked to the people from who are installing it. They told me that you guys would have that information. They didn't, I was like,
Well, we might purely because we've run into this before,
Yep,
but
yep.
yeah, we're not HVAC experts by trade.
that
but,
was my thought, which is why I started with them.
Okay. So my concern is, I mean, typically you need to be set back a certain distance from the house to get proper airflow, which could make what you're requesting here, you need more relief than what has been asked for. So that's kind of my concern. And then you talk about the 30 decibels. Do you know who the manufacturer is or what?
Mitsubishi.
Okay. All right. Yeah,
I did look that up.
Those are generally pretty quiet.
Yes.
Yeah.
I sat next to one at breakfast the other day, and I didn't even know I was sitting next to it.
Now, I have one at my house. It's pretty quiet. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
So I guess, right, the fundamental concern would be is I don't know what information your contractor provided to you, but I just want to make sure that you would be getting the right relief from this board and not need to come back.
And I wish that my people had given me a better answer, because I did call them when I was drawing this up to ask them how, because most things do need that setback. I guess maybe, do you have any idea what it is? No. Okay.
Not specific.
Could I request for further, like 24 inches, just?
I think,
We need to.
I think
It
what,
has,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Madam Chair.
no, I was going to say, it has to be advertised, so
Okay.
that's a big change for us to make.
It would have been nice if someone had let me know ahead of time that that was a concern, because I obviously don't have any idea.
Right.
You could always come back.
Well, I could, except for I will be headed to Ohio to take care of my demented parents for 3 months, so.
Yeah, no, I was going to make a comment similar to what Paul said. I just don't think we have enough information to take action on this at this time. And I'd hate to deny it, because then there's going to be all kinds of other problems. So I don't think we should do that, but I don't think we can make a judgment today.
Can we do a range?
Please.
The board can only take action on what was advertised for this application. So they can't do a range because they need to take action on what was advertised tonight, which is 3.5.
So why would someone
It's possible that it's enough for you. And we could
but now
act
you're
on
not
this.
voting on it anyhow, so that won't help me either.
We would vote on this if that's what you would like us to do, but if
But-
it doesn't work, then you would have to come back again, just as you would if we thought you needed more space. Do you know what I'm saying?
I don't think I even understand what the options are that you're
The
telling me.
options are to vote, for us to vote on on what was requested,
Okay.
which may or may not work for you.
But if it doesn't work,
Then
then
you
I
have-
have to start from scratch, or I get to come back with this and ask for, like, am I going to have to go and pay more money and do everything over again, or?
Yes. I'm going to let the city answer that.
It depends on what you're asking. If you meet the setback with a new design or a new location, then no, you wouldn't need to come back. So you really need to identify where you want to put it and how far away from the line it is. So we've asked for 3.5 feet, which the board will take action on tonight. If you move forward with your contractor.
I can't imagine I would need more than 3.5 feet, but I really don't want to come back, because I'm not kidding, I have 2 parents with dementia, and I'm leaving like Saturday for 3 months. So I don't
Do you want to
understand.
take a chance on it?
Well, I definitely don't, I'm not going to be able to come back anytime soon, so I still don't understand what you're telling me about my options. What I'm trying to figure out is if you don't vote today, then I have to come back, but I won't have to pay anything again. If you do vote today and I need something more, I still don't understand what that means.
Then you would probably have to pay again,
It would be a new application.
because it would be a new application. But if you leave without any action, you'll have nothing, whereas you have a 50-50, well, I don't know, some percentage chance of this working. I mean, I also have a split, but I didn't need to know how far it had to be from anything, and perhaps you didn't either.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Okay,
I'll
yes,
have you vote today.
Anybody?
That's,
Okay, all right, we really
That
can't
was
have
my
this
thought.
because it won't be on the record, we can't hear you. So
Okay.
what would you like to do now?
I would like to vote.
Okay. No,
Well, we have to conclude our public hearing, but yeah.
no, we haven't. No, we
Oh,
haven't.
sorry, well, I would like to move.
No, you don't
forward.
have to be sorry. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, you may have a seat, and I'll see if anyone in the public wants to talk to us. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone to speak in opposition? Anyone who knows about HVAC? All right. Then the public hearing is closed. And it is back to us. Mr. Metzen,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance as requested.
is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Mantle, yes, okay.
Okay. Taking the first two together, the variance is not contrary to the public interest and the spirit of those ordinances observed. This application won't alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten public health, safety, or welfare, and it doesn't conflict with the purpose of the ordinance. Substantial justice is done. In this case, the benefit to the applicant is outweighed by any harm to the general public. The values of surrounding properties are not diminished. There's no reason to think that adding a more energy efficient heating and cooling for this property would harm any other properties, and it's a quiet unit. Literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship because of the special conditions of the property, in that it's an undersized lot. It's actually at 2,600 square feet. It's as big as some houses are. And the house is located where it is on the property, so it kind of limits the locations to where this mini split could be located. So there's no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purposes of the ordinance and the specific application of this property. And finally, the proposed use is a reasonable one.
Okay, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion before we vote? Mr. Van?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, I will vote to support the motion, but I am fearful for the applicant that, you know, when the contractor truly kind of works everything out, as a member of the audience kind of indicated, I mean, with the setbacks and whatnot, you're probably looking at realistically a 2-foot setback rather than what's being requested for relief of about 3.5 feet, so.
Okay. Mr. Neese?
Yeah, I'll support the motion, but I have many of the same concerns Mr. Ryan has. I mean, if the current structure is 3.9 feet and she's asking for 3.5, she's basically asking for less than 6 inches. And I just can't see that the mini split, while itself may be, I don't know how wide they are, but it's hard for me to believe that having it off the building and the mini split itself is going to be less than 6 inches wide. And so I just assume that if that's the case, that more space is needed, she'll be able to come back or have a representative come back and apply for an amendment to the variance?
She can certainly have a representative come back, yes.
Right.
But that would
Yes.
be a whole new application,
But it
right?
would be a new,
Entailing all the costs that the
when
applicant
people
is
amend
concerned
something,
about.
it comes back as a new, as we're seeing later.
Right. So the only other option would be to, I'm not sure the correct term, but to move this forward to the next meeting when we might have more information. But she would have to have a
She would
representative.
have to have a representative here, and that's not a bad idea. Mr. Metzen?
Yeah, if I could just explain my logic is, Basically, if we don't approve it tonight, there's zero chance that she can install this. Whereas if we do approve it, there's at least a chance.
Right.
And based on the drawings, it appears that either this might be some kind of pass through the wall system, or those are just where the heads are going to be, and the condenser itself might be somewhere else. It's not entirely clear from the photos, but we don't actually know the specific situation of this HVAC installation, but we do know that if we don't approve it tonight, there's no chance for her to go forward. She would have to come back no matter what, whereas in this case, she might have to come back, but she might not.
Can I change? I'd like to put it on hold. You guys are freaking me out.
We really don't mean to.
I know, but you are, so I'd rather, I'll just try and deal with it in the fall. Can we just put it on hold? I'll
Okay,
try and
I'm
come back.
going to say one more thing. Keep in mind that if you have to be elsewhere, someone else can come for you.
Yeah.
So
that's
if you
a big
haven't,
ask.
okay,
You
that,
guys sit through these meetings, but it's a big ask.
all right, I'm sorry.
I appreciate it.
Okay, I'm sure there's some procedural thing for this, but I'm not sure.
Have a motion.
We have a motion.
We have a
so-
motion on the floor, so I guess we have to vote on
Well, gosh.
Vote it down.
it. It doesn't matter if she's not or not, it won't change one of them,
Motion's already on.
or passes.
We can table it if we wanted to, but
Would someone like to withdraw their motion?
I could withdraw it, but I think the applicant isn't entirely sure, and this is, in my opinion, this is the most beneficial for
Okay,
her.
and I understand, all right. So the motion is on the floor. The motion is to approve. Any further discussion? Okay. Ms. Record?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Nope.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So
It's fundamentally a good thing.
it's approved.
Yeah.
And hopefully
Everything works out.
it can work out. Okay. So the next motion is item C under new business. And it is the request of Stephen A. Singlar and Catherine L. Singlar, owners, for property located at 43 Holmes Court, whereas relief is needed to amend a variance granted on December 20th, 2022, to demolish the existing dwelling and construct a new single-family dwelling, which requires the following. 1. Variance from section 10.531 to allow a 16-foot front yard where 30 is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 101, Lot 14, and lies within the waterfront business and historic districts. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, Attorney Derek Durbin. I'm here on behalf of the owner and applicants for this particular property. As noted in the staff report, which I'm sure you've reviewed, in December 2022, this board granted a number of variances allowing the owners of the property to demolish the existing home at 43 Holmes Court and construct a new one in its place. One of the variances that was granted was a 17-foot front yard setback variance. After getting the approval in December 2022, the applicant applied for the relief or the wetlands permit that they need from the state through the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. As a result of a lot of back and forth, the NHDES, in their infinite wisdom, made a condition of their approval that the home be moved closer to the front boundary of the property by 1 foot. It's actually, they're requiring it to be slightly under a foot, but to be cautious, we have asked for a 16-foot front yard setback variance tonight to satisfy the DES requirement. What's proposed will result in a new code-compliant house on the property, replaces a house that's in very poor condition, has a dysfunctional floor plan, and a number of other issues as well, with a nice, tastefully designed house. Overall lot conditions will also be improved. There'll be a reduction in impervious surface coverage. As you'll notice from the plan that's up on the screen, One of the more interesting things about the property is it doesn't have a true front yard, at least if you use the definition in the zoning ordinance. It's also a landlocked property in that it doesn't have any access to a public street, which is also one of the reasons why it doesn't have a front yard. It is actually accessed through a private drive through 39 Holmes Court, which the applicants also own. So unless there are some questions at this stage, I know not everybody was on the board that's on the board now in 2022. I'm happy to answer any questions before just delving into the variance criteria.
Okay, Mr. Mano.
Okay. So, back in the day, we approved this with a 17-foot setback from the river, correct? That's the front yard.
From the front yard is the one facing the terminus of Holmes Court.
Ooh.
Yeah, the rear yard would be facing Piscataqua River.
Okay. So the front yard's what's facing Holmes Court, and the backyard is what's facing the river?
Yeah, that's correct. I should rephrase that. The front yard is actually facing 39 Holmes Court. So it's basically I know it's an odd situation, and arguably it shouldn't. I think logically requires a variance, but if you read the definition of front yard in the ordinance, it doesn't. Because it doesn't have a front yard. It's a very interesting property, I'll tell you.
Okay. That being said, so the 17 feet we granted was from Holmes Court to the building?
That's correct.
Okay, and the DES says you have to move the building back from the water, and that's why you need to reduce the 17 feet to 16 feet, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. What's the setback from the water in the zoning?
What's the requirement in the zoning ordinance, or what
is that the 20 feet we're looking at here?
It's currently 26 feet,
I understand. Well,
but it's 20 is the minimum.
that's prior to the demo. It'll be 21.
Yeah, sorry, I can't read the dimensions from here up there, so I've got to turn to the site plan. So, Paul, is your question, what is the proposed setback from the rear boundary?
Yeah. Is that the 21 feet?
It's looking, so existing is 13.4.
Can you put this up?
Proposed is 21.2.
Okay.
And they want basically 22.
Well, 20 fits the minimum. Okay, thanks, Derek.
Yeah, no problem.
Anybody? There was another hand, Mr. Neese.
Yeah. In your application, you say that the loss of 1 foot setback is described as inconsequential in the front. But yet you say that taking 1 foot off the back of the house would compromise the integrity of the design of the house, which I think is like removing about 24 square feet of area from the house, if I'm reading it.
I'm not sure the total square footage, but
could you, if you let me finish my question,
yeah,
please?
sorry.
Could you please elaborate on why you think that removing 1 foot would compromise the integrity of the plan? You make a conclusory statement, but you don't provide any evidence for why that is.
Yeah, and again, that is what I'm informed by our architect, and also I think it's evidenced by the fact that we are at, I think it's 1,297 finished square feet as it is. This was designed at basically the minimal amount of square footage, squeezing everything in order to accommodate, this isn't going to be a rental property or anything else. This is a family that lives in Exeter that is going to actually move into this house and use as a full-time residence. To accommodate everything that they need to accommodate here, also, which, again, this isn't a house that can be raised up, so to speak, because it would not work for a number of reasons, building code and otherwise. but it has been squeezed in as much as possible. I don't know the exact calculation on the square footage loss, but again, we're under 1,300 square feet, so it's as small or smaller than anything else really in the neighborhood, even at this size, and in order to accommodate the bathroom, bedroom, and kitchen and everything space. It's what was deemed to be the minimum necessary.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Rossi.
This may be a question more of curiosity than totally germane to the decision, but the same owner owns 39, correct?
That's correct.
And 39, I think part of the rationale for this project initially was that this particular property that we're talking about now, the one that's being rebuilt, was in poor condition and could not be saved and so on and so forth. Do you have any idea what their plans are for 39? Because it also seems to be not the most well-maintained property.
I'm happy to ask the owner of the property. I believe it was to rent it or continue to rent it, but I can ask.
Yeah.
Would you like that, Mr. Rossi?
Yeah. I'm actually only curious to know whether that, whether the plan is to keep that distance as it is, or if we're going to be seeing in the near future an expansion of 39.
Hi, my name's Steve Singlar, currently the owner of 39 Holmes Court and 43. 39 Holmes Court is actually getting remodeled as it is. We already gotten the variances and approvals from both HDC and I think from this board as well for some of the new heating unit that goes in, but the home itself is just going to be remodeled as it is.
Okay, thank you. So we're not going to be pushing it closer to
moving the
the
house,
current
yeah.
property under discussion. Thank you.
Question. Are there any further questions? Okay.
Yeah, if I could just turn to the variance criteria. Granting the variances will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance or the public interest. I would submit that the purpose behind a minimum front yard setback is kind of twofold. One, to maintain light, air, and space, or preserve light, air, and space for the abutting properties. Also, to maintain a certain streetscape. In this case, there's not really a streetscape to be maintained with this property because it abuts and is landlocked by 39 Holmes Court. Pushing the home 1 foot closer to the front boundary than what was previously approved is a minimal change. Technically, it will actually be under a foot. The distance, just so the board knows, between the houses on 39 and 43 Holmes Court will be about 19 feet apart from one another. If this property were zoned consistently with all the other properties on Holmes Court, which are zoned GRB, the house would not require any relief at all to be rebuilt on the property. This is the only property on Holmes Court that's zoned waterfront business, yet has been historically single family since as long as anybody can remember. Overall, the conditions of the property will be improved, most notably with a fairly significant reduction in pervious surface coverage. So for these reasons, granting the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten public health, safety, or welfare. Substantial justice will be done in granting the variance. The existing home does suffer from functional and physical obsolescence. It really can't be saved and meet building code and also meet floodplain requirements. As Mr. Neese pointed out, shrinking it by a foot would compromise the integrity of the plans, which have already undergone a very significant amount of review at the local and state levels, and only ran into the snag at the very end of the process with the NHDES and one individual that was uncompromising. Denying the variance would result in a loss to the applicant that's not outweighed by any gain to the public. Surrounding property values will not be diminished by granting the variance. The home that's proposed for the property will be of similar or even smaller size than many others on Holmes Court. It'll be a tastefully designed home, as you can see from the plans, modern amenities, so it should only help to maintain or improve surrounding property values. Denying the variance would constitute an unnecessary hardship. The property does have a myriad of special conditions. For one, it doesn't have a true front yard. Arguably, I'm not sure that we need to be here, but we were before and we are tonight. The property is at the end of a private right-of-way. There's no other homes on the same side of the street. Therefore, there's no streetscape to maintain, which is one of the purposes behind the ordinance. I would say if you look at the other houses on Holmes Court, you'll notice that they're much closer to the street than, or the front property boundary than this house would be to its front boundary. The property is abutted also in the rear by the Piscataqua River, which means that anything done on the property requires a ton of relief at the state level. So owing to these special conditions, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general purpose of the ordinance provision and its application to this property. And finally, the proposed use is reasonable. It will continue, well, it's not being used at the moment, but it will continue in the single-family use that it has historically been. So happy to answer any additional questions the board has. Thank you for your time.
Are there any questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this petition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against? Okay, the public hearing is closed. Mr. Olson.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the application. I don't want to be the Grinch on every single one of these tonight. I'd like to make a motion to approve the application as presented and advertised.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Ram. Okay.
So I did ask a question of Attorney Durbin with regard to the intentions for number 39. My primary purpose of going back and looking at the property today again was to assure myself that the conditions which existed at the time that we approved the original variance are still there, still the same, that nothing substantial has changed. Indeed, things are much the same as they have been for the last 270 years that this property's been in existence. So all of the same things, considerations that we had when the original application came forward are still relevant. The thing that caused us the most consternation at the time was the non-conforming use of a lot that is zoned in waterfront business. And so I will start with that and say that with regard to observing the spirit of the ordinance, this lot, although it is zoned in waterfront business, is really not able to be utilized that way because it is landlocked and there's no good way to get ingress and egress to the property for anything that comes in off the Piscataqua River. Therefore, even though that waterfront business zoning does reflect a legitimate public interest, granting this variance in this case would not be contrary to the public interest because the lot can't be used in that manner anyway. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. The lot is currently and has been for, I guess, centuries used as a residential lot, and there is no loss to the public by continuing that use that would outweigh the loss to the applicant by insisting that the use be changed, and therefore granting the variance would do substantial justice. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of the surrounding properties, and here's where the additional 1 foot moving closer to the front property line comes into play. That it really has an impact only substantially on number 39 Holmes Court, owned by the same property owner who has attested and obviously logically believes that moving the structure 1 foot closer to 39 Holmes will have no deleterious impact on the value of that property. And literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. The property itself does have many hardships, one of which I've already enumerated, and that is the landlocked nature of the lot. Another is that there just isn't enough room to solve the problems presented by the New Hampshire DEC in the request to get a foot farther away from the water line without granting this variance. So failure to grant this variance would really put us in conflict with other considerations that are very important for the proper utilization of this property, and therefore being strictly in observance with the ordinance would be an unnecessary hardship given the conditions of the property. And that is it. That's my motion.
Second. I'm
David.
sorry, I forgot. Do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do. Going back to the hardship, I mean, I do think that all the things that Mr. Rossi said, but especially the fact that I think the applicant's made a good argument here that the neighboring property at 39, which is really right up against the property line in and of itself, you couldn't really expand upon it if you wanted to, is GRB, GRC. If you look at that, I mean, basically the setback would be 5 feet versus the required 30 of waterfront business. The last time the board considered it, I think the vast majority of the board's concern at that point in time was with allowing a residential use in the waterfront business. Some of the exact dimensions here, while also part of the ultimate variances that were granted, were not the crux of what the board was concerned with. If this was zoned as a residential parcel and not as a waterfront business parcel, which the board last time concluded was not the correct zoning for it, then really it would be allowed to be much closer. And compared to the existing structures that are anywhere nearby, it's going to look like it has a huge setback even at 16 feet vice the 17 feet. And the other part of the hardship is that it is butted up against the water and has to go through this permitting process that, as the applicant's representative has indicated, did not turn out favorably for the applicant. So with that, I recommend approval.
Okay. Yes.
I just want to say, I mean, since we've already gone through this with a lot of criteria, I'm looking at this, it's a 1 foot adjustment being requested by a state agency of a previously approved application. Yeah, not a biggie.
Okay. Then we're ready to vote? Okay. Ms. Record?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
Mr. Ram?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay. So, the next order of business is the request of 366 Broad Street LLC, owner for property located at 366 Broad Street, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing multifamily and single-family dwellings and accessory structure and reconstruct 4 single-family dwelling units, which requires the following. Variance from section 10.513 to allow more than one dwelling per lot. Said property is located on Assessor Map 221, Lot 68, and lies within the General Residence A District. Is there anyone to speak to this petition?
Yes. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. Chris Mulligan again from Boson and Associates on behalf of the applicant, Green and Company. Michael Green from Green and Company is here with me. Green and Company has this property under contract and intends to redevelop it. We are here for a single variance that is multiple dwelling units on a single lot, which is not prohibited in the GRA, is not permitted in the GRA zone under section 10.513. This is a relatively large lot on Broad Street between South Street and Jones Avenue. It is currently non-conforming as to the rear and right side yard setbacks. It's not conforming as to lot area per dwelling. The property as it stands now is home to 7 units where there's actually only enough lot area for 4. And it also is currently non-conforming as to section 5.13 because there are two buildings standing alone that have dwellings within them. There is a main structure that has an attached carriage house that's attached by a small breezeway, and then behind that, in the rear of the property, there is the cottage that has a dwelling unit in it. In addition to that, there is a separate standalone accessory building on the property, a 3-bay garage. So it's quite a unique and interesting property. But the proposal before you tonight is to remove the existing non-compliant structures and replace them with 4 new single-family dwellings, which will comply with all dimensional requirements of the ordinance, all setbacks, and lot area per dwelling. The only relief, again, we are seeking tonight is relief from Section 10.513, which prohibits more than one freestanding dwelling per lot in this zone. And again, there are already 2 freestanding dwellings plus this attached carriage house on the lot, which is not compliant with current zoning. We note that the board received some comments from some of the abutters to this project to the north, and I'd like to just address those briefly. One of the comments was to request screening and landscaping along the common border, which is agreeable to us. We expect that as this project goes through site plan review, that a landscaping plan is going to be part of that process, and we anticipate that we'll get instruction from the planning board as we move through the process, but we are definitely agreeable to the screening and landscaping that the abutters have requested. With respect to a couple of mature trees at the front of the property, where it is adjacent to Broad Street, the applicant would save them if we can. If for whatever reason we cannot, as the project develops, we'll agree to replace them. Again, I would imagine that would be part of a landscaping plan that is going to be reviewed by TAC and the planning board. But again, we're agreeable to that. With respect to a couple of concerns regarding construction that were raised, one about blasting ledge and the other about the presence of lead paint. With respect to ledge, we at this time have no knowledge of ledge on the site. We haven't gotten that far into the project to determine whether or not there is going to be any. However, obviously we are going to comply with all necessary construction guidelines and restrictions and best practices, including the removal of ledge if we encounter any, and as part of the demo of the existing structures, we're going to have to mitigate and remediate any lead that is present, lead paint that's present. So the only other issue that was significant that was raised was a request that the siting of the houses that we propose to build be set back a little further. And if I may approach I would ask the board to consider accepting what I've just handed up and circulated. This is an aerial view of the proposed project mapped into the Broad Street environment. And what it shows is that as proposed, the location and siting of the front 2 dwellings are very nearly in line with the houses on either side of it. And I've got an extra copy of this up here. take a look at it. But in any event, this is the aerial view. From the street view. Any variance between the fronts of the houses on either side, we believe, will be very negligible and not noticeable. There is a possibility that as this moves through site review, that the location of the homes will be adjusted slightly. There may be an opportunity to shift some of these back somewhat, but we're mindful that we have a rear setback that we want to respect as well. That, I think, addresses the public comment that we were made aware of by the planning staff late last week. This is obviously a property that's been utilized as a multifamily residence for many, many years. It is essentially been subject to numerous additions and modifications over the years, such that the main structure and the attached carriage house has sort of a rabbit warren-like configuration, which would make the sort of renovation and rehabilitation of it, in addition to the acquisition cost of the property itself, cost prohibitive. So the proposal before you is to remove the existing non-conforming structures and replace them with 4 units, each a single-family dwelling that would be entirely compliant with all zoning. So that is the project in an overview. With respect to the criteria for granting a variance, the first two, again, you consider together. That is, granting the variance will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance, nor will it be contrary to the public interest. Here you have to make a decision as to whether or not what's being proposed will alter the essential characteristics of the neighborhood, or would it threaten the health, safety, and welfare of the general public. Here, what we are proposing is to replace a significantly non-compliant property with one that will be keeping in character with the existing streetscape along Broad Street. The essential residential character of the neighborhood will not be altered in any material respect. With respect to health, safety, and welfare, if you start from the proposition that your zoning ordinance in general is a collective expression of the community's desires for health, safety, and welfare, what we're doing brings this property almost into total conformance with your ordinance, where it has significant noncompliance right now. The project requires approval, site plan approval, so there will be additional eyeballs on this project, further assuring that health, safety, and welfare of the public is adequately protected. Substantial justice will be done by granting the variance. Here you have to balance the loss to the applicant should the variance be denied against any gain to the public should you require strict conformance with the ordinance. Here the only relief we require is relief from section 5.13, the prohibition on multiple dwelling units on a single lot. This property already violates that, as well as all the other dimensional nonconformities I've spoken about. What we're proposing actually meets the lot area per dwelling requirement and replaces the existing development that drastically exceeds the lot area per dwelling requirement. So again, if you start from the presumption that the zoning ordinance has a lot area per dwelling requirement, and that is a certain expression of what is in the public interest, what we're proposing to do is substantially just by bringing this into greater compliance. Values of surrounding properties will not be diminished by granting the variance. We're eliminating all of these dimensional nonconformities. We will be replacing an old and outdated structure with new construction, energy-efficient construction. These will be new homes that will increase property values in the vicinity. It will be in keeping with the architectural style seen on Broad Street, and values of surrounding properties will not be negatively affected in any way. Special conditions associated with the property prevent it from being properly enjoyed under the strict terms of the zoning ordinance. Again, and I apologize for repeating myself, but we have a property that's non-compliant and non-conforming in terms of the number of permitted units, the setbacks, and the density. There's already more than one freestanding dwelling on the lot in violation of the requirement of 10.513. This is a very large lot, much larger than the lots on either side of it. So it is a unique property. The use is a reasonable one. It's a residential use in a residential zone. It's identical to the residential use that's there now. It's just much more conforming. And there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the prohibition on a more than one dwelling structure on a property and its application to this property. This property already exceeds the prohibition on multiple dwelling units or dwelling structures per lot. And again, it far, far exceeds the allowable density, almost double the lot area per dwelling unit than is otherwise required. So there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of this requirement and its application to this property. And I think, before I sum up, I think the way to illustrate that is permitted by special exception on this lot. If the owner wanted to, the owner could come before you with a proposal for a multi-family house of 4 units by special exception. And I don't believe there would be any good faith basis to deny that special exception should that application come before you, because there would be nothing in that particular scenario that would be counter to any of the criteria necessary to grant a special exception. And if it's allowed by special exception and those specific criteria are met, you really have to grant it. Here, we're not seeking that. We're seeking what we think is a much more beneficial use of the property, not only in terms of its highest and best use for the owner, but in what would be more beneficial for the surrounding properties, much more in keeping with what you see in the surrounding properties. So for all those reasons, I believe we meet all the criteria for getting the variance from Section 5.13, the prohibition on more than a single freestanding dwelling on a property, and we would request that you approve it.
Thank you. Are
You're
there
welcome.
questions for Attorney Mulligan? Yes, Mr. Mann.
What you're proposing are 4 single-family homes, correct?
That's correct.
It will be condo ownership, correct?
It would have to be, yes. Well, I guess maybe let me back up. I suppose it wouldn't have to be. It's conceivable that a single entity or owner could own all 4 and rent them out, but I think that's unlikely. It is likely to be.
But as you're proposing, it's a condo development, correct?
Yeah.
Since, the lot is big enough to do a planned unit development, why wouldn't you do that and split the lot?
That's a question that hadn't even popped into my transom, Mr. Mannell. The possibilities are, probably.
You have enough room to put a 20-foot roadway down the middle of the property and still have 4 7,500 square foot properties. The only thing you might need is a variance for that public roadway as far as front yard side.
Yeah, I think the development costs would be significantly higher. So that's probably one of the reasons, but that is just not the project before you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Neese?
I guess I'm struggling a little bit with why you're not trying to make the property completely compliant with the ordinance. Section 10.233.50 of our ordinance says that when the ordinance has more stringent conditions and requirements than existing, the purpose of the ordinance is to promote compliance. We could have a fully compliant structure here, assuming you got the special variance, which, as you said, would probably be difficult to deny. Special exception, which, as you pointed out, would be probably difficult to deny if you came forward with it. So what is it? What are the special conditions about this property that make that
Well, I
impossible?
think, keep in mind that the test is not impossibility, it's unnecessary hardship. And so I think the analysis needs to be, is it necessary to require a 4-unit apartment building or a 4-unit dwelling in a single contained space on a lot this large? Is there some
Excuse me.
Bless you.
underlying benefit that overrides the applicant's desire to develop this in a certain way? And I would argue there's not, because you've already got significant and substantial nonconformities in this property as it exists now. The property is already in violation of the prohibition which we're seeking relief from. And the fact that it may be possible to obtain a special exception for a 4-unit structure, I think highlights why it's unnecessary to require us to do that. We can get 4 units there no matter what. And if that's the case, then is it necessary to require that we have strict compliance with the prohibition on multiple dwelling structures on a lot?
I might follow up, Madam Chair.
Yeah, sure.
So we've got a non-conforming lot, which violates a number of the setbacks and has, I think, if I'm correct, 3 buildings on it, 2 residences and an accessory structure.
Yep.
And you're proposing to replace that with a non-conforming lot that has 4 residences on it.
Well, the lot itself is conforming. The structures are non-conforming.
So you're proposing to make 4 structures on it that it would be non-conforming.
Well, the
rather than
structures
2.
themselves would be conforming beyond the
So you understand my point, though?
Yeah.
You're increasing the number of residences by 2.
residential buildings, yes.
Residential buildings
Yes,
by 2.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And I'm still struggling to know what are the special conditions of the property that make that necessary?
Well, so you've got a property that's, 4 times the size of the lot area per dwelling requirement, a property that's much larger than those in its immediate neighborhood. The existing built environment on the property is a special condition of the property, and it's extraordinarily non-compliant. So those are all special conditions of this property that, in my opinion, cut against requiring strict conformance with this one specific provision.
Okay,
So
thank you.
we're eliminating all of these non-conformities, but we're requiring relief from that one specific provision.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Rossi.
So the main building, not counting the carriage house that's connected by the breezeway, there's actually nothing non-conforming about that structure, correct? I mean, dimensionally, it's where it needs to be, and it's not problematic. All the non-conformance comes from the carriage house, the garage, the other house, in terms of setbacks and
I believe you are correct, yes.
I don't understand why it's necessary then to destroy the existing structure. The neighborhood has a certain look and feel to it.
I'm sorry.
The neighborhood has a certain feel and characteristic to it, and I think that the existing main structure, really, that's all you see from the roadway on Broad Street, and not keeping it there. I think that does change the characteristics of the neighborhood. Why is it necessary to remove that?
Well, so the main structure itself that you're talking about,
Yeah.
as it stands now, has 5 dwelling units in it. So standing alone, that structure, even though it complies with the setbacks, kind of tips the lot area per dwelling calculus.
That's kind of how the structure is being utilized as opposed to the fundamental nature of the structure itself.
Well, if you can.
I'm sure it wasn't built as a.
No, I'm sure it wasn't, and that's
5
part of
unit.
I think that's part of the challenge of this property is it's, because it has been carved up the way it has, getting it back to the way it was originally developed is, just not a possibility.
Thank you.
Well,
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Is there anyone in the public to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone in the public to speak in opposition to this petition? You can just come up.
I'm not speaking for it or against it. I just wanted to
Okay,
ask the
two
people
for or
a question.
against is possible.
Is that possible?
Yeah.
Yes,
To ask-
yes.
I know there's,
Tell us your name, where
okay,
you
Vincent
live, and
Preen.
speak to us.
Vincent Preen, I own the property right next to
Okay.
this at 400. And I know there's ledge where they're going to be doing this, which is fine with me. I was just wondering how they're going to get rid of the ledge if they're putting foundations in. Do they blast? Do they drill? How do they do it? And is there some type of a protection for my property if something gets damaged? That's all. That's my only question.
Those decisions will come as they go through further review, which they most assuredly will.
Oh, okay.
But not
I just,
from us.
I don't care one way or the other if you do it. It's fine with
That
me.
will definitely be considered as they go through the process, should they be approved.
All right. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Good evening. My name is Kathy Hodson. I live at 616 Central Road in Rye. I'm here in opposition to this project as an abutter. My husband and I own the property across the street at 389 Broad Street. We've owned it for 42 years. I object because 366 Broad Street is a handsome house built in 1900. Its size and form make it distinctive, but very representative of Portsmouth at an earlier time. To state that 4 fake early 20th century houses can replace it with no detrimental impact on the character of the neighborhood is insulting. You're basically talking about a subdivision, 4 homes, 1 driveway in. How can that not be a significant change to the character of the neighborhood? Next, this proposal eliminates 7 apartments. I think it's safe to assume the new houses will be relatively expensive, while these apartments are probably relatively affordable. Isn't Portsmouth desperate for affordable housing? Our house at 389 has been rented for 42 years. I can think of at least 5 other buildings on our block that contain rental apartments. Rental apartments are part of the neighborhood. Long ago, our neighbor Sarah Mildred Long told us that our house was built as a 2-family when it was built in 1910. I know some might be thinking, but there are so many apartment buildings going up in Portsmouth. Surely that's taking care of the problem. But I would like to say that that apartments in old houses appeal to different people, and many renters prefer them. In 2018, we rented our apartment sight unseen to a family from South Carolina. The father, a military veteran, had fond memories of Portsmouth High School from when his military father was stationed at Pease. He loved renting on Broad Street so his daughter could walk to Portsmouth High School. After she graduated, the parents bought a house in a more affordable area. Their daughter is now at Keene State studying to become a music teacher. Who knows, maybe she'll return to Portsmouth and teach. We also rented to a woman firefighter with 2 small children who was going through a divorce. She was thrilled to have her children in such a nice neighborhood. Next, trees. The application mentions concern for the environment but doesn't address trees. We know they capture and store carbon. They provide shade in the summer. How many trees will come down? And speaking of the environment, everybody knows the greenest building is the one you have. Tossing 366 Broad Street into a landfill and building 4 houses with new materials can't be good for the environment. Looking at the criteria, the first 2, contrary to the public interest and in the spirit of Portsmouth, I would say that reducing affordable housing is contrary to the public interest. And the spirit of Portsmouth is historic preservation. That's why people come here. So demolishing a 1900 house doesn't work under that. Substantial justice, I would say demolition is not what Portsmouth is about, and displacing residents is not justice. Diminishing the values in the nearby neighborhood, I would suggest that building a subdivision would do that. It won't look at all like the rest of the street. It would decrease the values. And the hardship, I can't buy the hardship because I'm a former CPA and it's profitable to rent apartments on Broad Street. So I don't see a hardship for the owner. I do see a hardship for the city in losing apartments and possibly affordable housing. And so I urge you to vote against this project. Please don't set this precedent. And remember, I know you will, or you do, that demolition is forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Good evening, Madam Chair, rest of the board. My name is Sally Mulhern. I live at 60 Pinehurst Road, which is a road that runs parallel to Broad Street. I'm also the owner of the office building at 361 Middle Street, which is in the heart of the historic district. So I'm fully committed to making sure that the character of Portsmouth is preserved. Attorney Mulligan started this evening with a phrase that I think sets the tone. He said that this property is unique and interesting. I do not see the 4 houses that are planned for this property to be unique or interesting. I agree with the prior speaker in objection to this variance. Variances are not guaranteed. They are granted. Fortunately, this particular purchaser is evidently under contract, and I assume that the granting of this variance is a contingency of that contract moving forward. So certainly no harm will be done to him if it's not granted. Whereas I know the harm that will be done to all of my neighbors on Pinehurst that abut this property. These are beautiful open areas with lovely historic homes. The historic home that would be closest to the street, Mr. Rossi, that you talk about, has a beautiful Victorian porch. The trees are tremendous. I think I have a little insight into ledge and trees. Our property at 361 Middle Street was subject to the 6 weeks of the boom, 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 boom of ledge. And we lost, I can't tell you that it was because of that, but it was immediately after, within a few days, a tree that was at least 350 years old. Again, loss of trees, demolishing, that's permanent. I want to conclude with focusing on the change to the character. I ride my bike back and forth every day on that street in front of that property. It's one of the few streets where you can safely ride a bike. And the thought of putting in a mini subdivision just makes me so upset. And by the way, this is not the first time we heard this. 4 years ago, the initial application for a similar property down the street was denied because it looked like a mini subdivision. So I hope when you're all upstairs 50, 100 years from now, you can look down and say with pride, I helped preserve that wonderful, unique property, that unique and interesting property, according to Attorney Mulligan, that will preserve the character of a very special city where everyone wants to move. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The previous speaker, your glasses are on the front. Okay.
Good evening, Margot Doring, 300 Jones Avenue. As I read this proposal, I find two basic premises in the request. First, that a non-conforming lot is a hardship on the developer and a nuisance to the neighborhood. Second, any change that results in fewer nonconformities should justify a larger nonconformity. I disagree. First, this is a neighborhood that contains many nonconforming structures. There is nothing to suggest that bringing some aspects of the property to code will make it suit the neighborhood any better than it does today. Ironically, the largest nonconformity, that of multiple buildings on the lot, is the exact variance, but on a larger scale, that is being sought today. This variance is also by far the most impactful that could be asked of this neighborhood. The request asks to double the number of freestanding buildings from 2 to 4 and increases the number of bedrooms from 11 to as many as 16, an almost 50% increase. I'll add to that the amount of driveway that's going to exist is certainly more than before. Is this a hardship to the developer? I've always been puzzled by someone buying a property knowing that their plans for it do not conform with the zoning requirements and then claiming a hardship. I find it even more egregious that a developer who has no plans to live on the property, but buys it to make a profit, then claims that the existence of those known zoning requirements are imposing a hardship on his or her ability to make an economic profit. There's a saying, your failure to plan does not constitute an emergency on my part, and I believe that applies here. That the developer faces challenges by buying a property that requires zoning relief should not be solved by and at the expense of the neighborhood, but by the developer, either by choosing a different property or suggesting a different plan. For example, as has been suggested earlier, the developer could retain the original conforming primary structure and suggest different plans for the back part of the property. This would be more in keeping with the character of the street. Regarding property values, the applicant claims that the value of the surrounding properties would not be impacted because the lot is large enough. While this may be true, if you cut down all of the trees on the lot. While an exact plan will not be available to the neighborhood until and if this reaches the planning board, just looking at the property and the planned building locations, This lot will lose just about all of its mature shade trees. This will impact the shade and privacy of surrounding properties, which will reduce their value. The developer will probably suggest in their site plan, and as suggested tonight, that new trees will be added. These are usually placed in front of the homes and will take the form of baby trees that will need at least 20 and upwards of 40 years to replace the current shade, privacy, and natural habitat that exists today. Meanwhile, the edges of the property that buffer the neighbors will vanish. If you want to see how stark this looks, go visit the developer's property off of Banfield Road. In addition, there is no evidence that new construction and energy efficiency in any way improve the value of existing homes. One can argue that the reason people want to live in this neighborhood is because the homes are not new. They are quality-built homes, as evidenced by their continued existence over the decades and how quickly they are purchased when they are rarely available for sale. The argument that existing nonconformities prevent the enjoyment of the property is not a valid one, since the enjoyment of the property is in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. From a developer's point of view, the current conditions are an impediment to his or her plans. To another buyer, this property could be enjoyed just the way it is, and apparently has been since 1900. Reasonable use. The applicant claims the use is identical in character and consistent with adjacent properties. An exterior survey of the homes along this street shows, to me, many single-family homes with one dwelling on each lot. Excuse me, I shouldn't say dwelling, one house on each lot compared with the proposal. Lastly, this property is in nonconformity in relatively innocuous ways that have not bothered the neighborhood for 124 years. To grant a significant variance on the number of dwellings that increases built square footage to close to half of the lot size plus driveways in exchange for resolving the minor issues is not justified. On a side note not related to the variances requested, Portsmouth is increasing its focus on sustainability in the environment. To permit perfectly serviceable dwellings to be torn down and thrown into a landfill is absolutely wasteful and against our sustainability goals. This is over 4,000 square feet of living space and the envelope that goes with it. Rehabilitation of these structures, or at the very least the primary conforming building, would support those goals while still allowing the applicant plenty of opportunity to propose an alternate plan to develop other parts of the property in a manner more in keeping with the neighborhood. I agree with some of the comments regarding the style of these buildings, how they are or are not in keeping with the neighborhood. Generally speaking, I would say they are not. I would urge the board to deny this request and suggest the applicant develop a new proposal that retains the primary structure and preserves the property's aesthetic qualities for the enjoyment of humans and wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members. Jim Lee, 520 Sagamore Avenue. I'd like to speak in opposition to this application for multiple reasons. The first one is it would definitely be a change in the neighborhood character. Proposed new houses would significantly alter the essential character of the neighborhood, which is a key reason for denying or approving a variance. Larger, more expensive homes would disrupt the existing architectural harmony and social fabric of the area. Number two, this would be precedent setting. Granting this variance could set a precedent for other developers to seek similar exceptions, leading to a domino effect that further erodes the zoning regulations. I would direct your attention about a half mile south of there to 550 Sagamore Avenue, which you no doubt remember was before you a month or so ago, and they were seeking a similar variance to tear down one house and build 4 houses. They came back, took that horse in the barn, hooked up a different buggy to it, came back, wanted to build 3 houses, which he then turned out as well. So apparently the multiple houses on lots zoned GRA single family are not flying too well. The current zoning was put in place to maintain a specific density and type of housing. Allowing larger homes contradicts the intent of the zoning law, which aimed to preserve the community structure and environment. There's no hardship here. The developer doesn't face a hardship here that justifies the need for a variance. The hardship has to be with the land and nothing else. Economic gain for the developer is not a sufficient reason to override the zoning laws. This application is also inconsistent with the Portsmouth 2025 master plan, which I'll read you a couple of paragraphs from. Portsmouth suburban neighborhoods will be better connected to the rest of the city and play an important part in making the city more resilient. Suburban neighborhood areas zoned rural or single residence A or B are characterized by lower density development patterns and mostly devoted to single-family uses. These neighborhoods cover 21% of the city and provide housing for a range of family sizes and income. Single-family neighborhoods range from large lot luxury homes and cluster developments such as Tide Watch along Sagamore Creek to post-war tract housing at Elwyn Park and manufactured housing off Lafayette Road. As housing costs continue to rise faster than income levels across the city, urban neighborhoods still offer moderately priced market rate housing. Maintaining and expanding this affordability is a priority. I thank you, and again, I ask you to deny this variance application.
Thank you. Anybody else to speak in opposition?
Good evening. My name is Lena Wyand, and I live at 65 Pinehurst Road. I am here to also ask for you to deny the petition as presented and advertised. In August of 2014, a very similar project was presented to the board by Paul Burton at 482 Broad Street. He asked for variances to construct 4 freestanding dwellings as well on his land, and it was denied. It was denied because the proposal was contrary to public interest, as it would not be in keeping with the look, feel, and character of the neighborhood, which mainly consists of properties with 1 building per lot, and the majority of which face the street. Second, 4 freestanding dwelling units would not observe the spirit of the ordinance. Thirdly, there was no hardship in the property that would justify granting the variances. And I think that these are all applicable to this situation as well. I have 2 of my neighbors ask me to read. Is that okay if I share? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. They couldn't be here tonight. Dear members of the Adjustment Board, thank you for the opportunity to voice our concerns about Green & Company's demolition and development proposal for 366 Broad Street. We are Vicki Boyd and Anna K. Vorsteg, residents of 35 Pinehurst Road, the property that abuts the northwest end of 366 Broad, and we oppose Green & Company's redevelopment proposal. We disagree with the applicant's notion that demolishing the beautiful and historic buildings at 366 Broad, dating back to 1900, would result in no change in the essential characteristics of the neighborhood. The existing buildings on the lot are landmarks to Portsmouth character and history at the turn of the century, part of a lovely streetscape of antique homes on large lots with ample yards and plenty of open space. Indeed, the main house with its grand sweeping front porch and adjoining carriage house matches other homes that dot lovely Broad Street, a street many people in the surrounding neighborhoods walk daily, taking in its picturesque architecture, mature gardens, yards, and maple trees. This is quintessential Portsmouth, the kind of street that makes our city special and unique. Removing a home that has stood for more than 120 years with its lovely lines and strong bones would be a tragedy. It is removing the very character that makes Broad Street, and Portsmouth, Portsmouth. As the owner and resident of the Pinehurst Road property immediately abutting the west end of 366 Broad, we have no qualms with the way the Broad Street law is configured and used currently. The bungalow behind the large house sits right at our back fence. We have never had any issue with this, nor with any of the residents of this dwelling or any of the other dwelling units on this lot. Further, we are sensitive to the fact that there is limited availability of housing for working people in Portsmouth. The people that staff our schools, our municipalities, our shops, and our restaurants. It seems the apartments and rental units at 366 Broad provide housing for this very demographic. Destroying them eliminates 7 dwelling units to replace them with 4. This takes us backwards, not forwards. In short, we oppose Green & Company's proposal for 3 reasons. Number 1, we have no problem with the existing configuration of the property. Number 2, demolishing the antique home and outbuildings destroys part of our cherished heritage and town history. Number 3, redeveloping the property as proposed not only unnecessarily disrupts the neighborhood, but it reduces the number of available dwelling units, eliminating housing for demographic of Portsmouth citizens that already feels the pinch of a scarcity of workforce housing. And number 4, the buildings that Green and Company are proposing to construct do not match the aesthetic and structural integrity of the buildings they are proposing to destroy. We regret that due to a prior family obligation that has us out of town, we are unable to be present for this important meeting to voice our reservations in person. Thank you again for a chance to register our concerns in this fashion. Sincerely, Vicki Boyd and Anna K. Vorstay. Thank you. And then my neighbor who lives at 51 Pinehurst Road, she says, thank you for hearing my objections to the proposed redevelopment project at 366 Broad. I am Darcy Knowles, owner and resident at 51 Pinehurst Road, which abuts the back of the property at issue. My home is situated between the Wyans and the Boyd Vorsteg properties. As neighbors on a beautiful, quiet street near downtown Portsmouth, we are aligned in our opposition to this development, the scale of which seems greatly out of proportion to the character of our neighborhood and that of Broad Street. This proposal looks like a subdivision on a street that should be protected from this kind of commercial development. I agree with Vicki and Anna Kay when they argue that no change in the essential characteristics would result in this proposal is accepted. Indeed, the idea that constructing a subdivision with 4 large homes at the entrance of one of the most family-friendly and walk streets in town would leave it unchanged is absurd. I also have no issue with the current configuration of dwellings at this property and agree that it provides essential workforce housing, which the new plan would obliterate. Please carefully consider the negative impact this could have on this section of our beautiful town and deny this request. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this statement. Sincerely, Darcy Knowles.
Thank you. Anyone to speak to, for, or against? To, for, or against?
Just briefly, Madam Chair, just a couple of points to address some of the issues that were raised. You heard quite a bit about the distinctive character and perhaps historic nature of the existing main structure on this property. We acknowledge that it's very, very old. I would just remind you that this is not in Portsmouth Historic District. The owner would be within its rights to make substantial and significant changes up to and including raising the structure. And that is not something that is before this board. Similarly, Mr. Lee indicated that he took objection with the imposition of larger, more expensive houses on this property. With all due respect, one of the criteria that is before you is whether or not the project results in a diminution in values, larger, more expensive housing. If in fact that's what is this project results in, actually will increase values of surrounding properties. And I would also point out that permitted by right on this lot, if the owner were so inclined, would be a single-family dwelling. And on a lot this size, at the acquisition costs that you are looking at here, you could see an enormous single-family house on this lot, given how large it is. So the concern that there may, that what is being proposed is larger than what exists, I think misses the mark. One of the speakers mentioned Mr. Burton's failed project many, many years ago. That is a complete apples to orange situation. The Burton residence was a single-family residence on a lot on Broad Street, and the proposal was to replace it with multiple townhouses, I believe. Not only is this a much different project, The zoning ordinance has changed considerably since that project was before this board. So in sum, I understand that there is some concern about the aesthetic preservation of this particular property, but that is not within the purview of this board. Otherwise, I believe we meet all the criteria for granting the one specific variance that we have before you, that is more than a single dwelling unit on a lot, given the unique characteristics of this lot. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. 2 for or against? Public hearing is closed. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, welcome back. We are now in session again. Okay, so what would we like to do?
I guess open to discussion, right?
Yes,
Paul,
discussion.
I'll start it off.
Okay.
I'm actually have been in this house. This was my eldest daughter's third grade teacher. And we went over there. I mean, granted, we're talking about
A while.
20 plus years ago, but it is a very nice old house. Right now, I'm not seeing the hardship. Simply because it's a non-conforming lot for two specific structures that are currently on the lot. The back garage and the extension off the end of the house. Other than that, the property's conforming, other than density. That being said, the applicant has made the point that he can build 4 units connected by special section. Well, that's true. But at the same time, I'm looking at this, and while the lot is indeed large, practically every lot on that side of Broad Street is huge. Can they build a single-family home that would be a huge home in that lot? Yeah, they can. But at the same time, I don't see the special conditions owing to this property that would constitute a hardship. It's non-conforming as to, like I said, 2 setbacks by the back garage and the extension to it. Those are the only 2 setback that are non-conforming. The density, yes, and the number of permitted units, yes. But other than that, I don't see a hardship where the owner can enjoy the proper use of this property. Is building 4 single-family homes a reasonable use? Well, that's a matter of opinion. I do believe that given the nature of the neighborhood on that side of the street, this lot's not much different from any other lot on that side of the street, and putting 4 single-family houses on that specific lot would change the character of the neighborhood. So right now, I'm not looking too optimistic.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Rossi?
I'd like to give some thought to this concept of what it means to change the essential character of a neighborhood. And by its nature, that statement requires some qualitative judgment, a great deal of qualitative judgment, because there is no exact legal definition of essential character, nor is there an exact legal definition of neighborhood. I only know this because I've inquired about it, and that's what I've been told. So that means that we have some discretion, and it goes back to the reason that we're here as a zoning board comprised of town or city residents, because we understand what the character of these various neighborhoods are, or is, whichever is the right one. And we are charged with bringing that understanding into our evaluation of these variance requests. As such, I think that although the applicant's attorney, like other attorneys who come with similar applications, would like to narrow the scope of our consideration to not think about the nature of the house or property that's being demolished and what it's being replaced with, and taking that as being outside, being, any of the architectural considerations being outside of our purview, which strictly speaking it is. It is within our purview to make an assessment about the characteristics of the neighborhood and how this specific proposal would or would not alter them. It's my assessment that this proposal would alter the essential characteristics of Broad Street. It is a very interesting neighborhood. I don't think it would alter the characteristics of Pinehurst at all. Most of this is completely shielded from the properties in Pinehurst, so I don't see that. But I do think that the neighborhood being Broad Street, this home, the way it's situated, even the way it looks, it is absolutely fitting and an essential component of the characteristics of that neighborhood. And I think the application fails on maintaining or not altering the essential characteristics of the neighborhood. So I will not be supporting it.
Okay. Anybody else? Ms. Record.
I agree with Mr. Rossi. I feel like that, as presented, this would definitely alter the characteristics of the neighborhood, and to put in what looks like mini subdivision with 4 houses that don't look like what's on that street, I can't support it.
Yes.
I have a comment. I'm not sure how useful it is, but just a little thought experiment. As I was thinking about the outrage and how unlikely we would be to approve if there was already 4 family homes there and they were proposing 7 units, 5 in an attached structure and then a separate structure. I mean, I know that's not what's before us, but I had that little thought experiment, and I think it might have some help as a thought experiment.
And I'm
but
going to support that thought experiment because it's been going through my head as well. This is a very interesting neighborhood because one side of the street doesn't belong to the other side of the street. I mean, they're just huge lots on one side and a very regulated block on the other side. And it would be hard to defend what exists there. And one of the things that concerns me a little bit is that when those large lots with the very large houses start to fall apart or go into estates, somebody's going to want to do something with them. And I'm not sure it's practical that we say we'll just build one huge, large house, because I don't think this is going to be the end of requests like this. Having said that, while I wouldn't call this a subdivision, I do think the way it breaks up the streetscape does change the essential look of the neighborhood. And because there are so many other large lots as one goes down Broad Street, I don't think this is unique, or hardship. It doesn't form a hardship with its uniqueness. But, so I'm not going to be able to support it either, although I do have some concerns going forward. Yes, Mr. Lamb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just first of all, we had a lot of good speakers who came before us, providing some information. Just to sort of address some of that comments, in terms of preservation of this existing home, the applicant's representative is correct in the sense that there is, outside of historic districts, and as we've discussed in a number of our other meetings, very little that allows the city to protect an old home. Unfortunately, the city can only do what it can do through enabling legislation that's provided through the state, and there just simply isn't anything there for enabling legislation that prevents a home that is outside of a historic district, which are required to keep your historic districts just certain areas that can, meet that criteria. There's very little to prevent demolition of those homes. So again, that's an issue that many of our speakers were impassioned about. I recommend reaching out to your state representatives and state senators to try and see what can be done about that. Second part was, the nature of the existing number of dwelling units on the property. I, in general, would probably agree that it's probably the type of housing that the city actually needs more of, not less of. But that said, it is a nonconformance with our zoning ordinance. The applicant's representative is correct in the sense that this board's job is not to preserve nonconformances necessarily. The applicant could continue with the nonconformance should they so choose, but we don't really have a lot of tools to say, hey, it's nonconforming, you need to keep it nonconforming. We are here to help to move closer to our zoning ordinance, which in this particular case may not be fully what the city needs, but it is what our current zoning ordinance reads to be. That said, I think the biggest issues that we have here are the first two criteria, which we do take in tandem, which is essential characteristics of the neighborhood and the spirit of the ordinance. And to me, if, looking at on page 84 at the proposed plan that the applicant has, that is pretty much like the textbook illustration of exactly what the exact reason why you don't allow multiple dwelling units on a single property. Basically, you're taking a rectangle, dividing it into four, and bloop, 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 putting four houses on each corner. That's not what you want to have for your look to preserve the essential characteristics of the neighborhood. That's why we say one dwelling unit only. It basically flies in the face of everything that you're trying to accomplish with that aspect of the ordinance. And I do think it is an important aspect of the ordinance. We're not talking simply like, 4 inches versus 10 inches, something along those lines. I mean, this is for whole structures equally spaced across the corners of the property. I also think that one of the abutters who brought up that, I know the applicant gave us the extra handout, tried to say, hey, look, our new home is really not that much closer, but it is pretty significantly closer. I mean, the placement of the existing house is such that it's pretty substantial. The bulk of it is substantially away from the property line. And looking at page 83 of our packet, the existing conditions, I know the applicant has kind of made the argument of, hey, I'm making this a lot better, I'm getting rid of all these nonconformances, but the actual amount of nonconformance with the existing homes is extremely minor. Really, the only major incursion is the garage structure, which sits, quite close to the property line at about 2 feet off of it. That said, however, garage structures very close to property lines is a characteristic of this and a number of other neighborhoods in the general area. Something we see a lot of, and it's only a single level, relatively flat roof structure. The other nonconformances that the applicant is saying that they're correcting are very minor relative to the imposition that they will have with now putting the 4 new homes right up against the property line. With that, though, I would say that I think the applicant has made some positive arguments with regards to hardship. I do think this property is actually wider, larger, and because of the location of the existing home, could offer some rehabilitation options where there might be an argument to be made that another dwelling unit, perhaps a duplex or something, could be situated in one corner of the property by either keeping or perhaps providing something new that much more closely mimics what is currently existing for the existing two houses. To me, they could easily be candidates for rehabilitation, but at the very least, something that certainly mimics what is currently there could be potentially complemented by a modest structure somewhere else on this decent-sized lot. But what is being proposed is simply, beyond what we are trying to accomplish with the ordinance and what we are, what the essential characteristics of the neighborhood are.
Mr. Nace.
Thank you. I still struggle with the idea of what are the special conditions of this property that distinguish it from other properties in the area. There are several properties in the area that are not perhaps quite as large, but are large, and there's at least one that I believe is probably larger and also has non-conforming buildings on it in the term of number of residences. I believe there's an apartment, if the city records are correct anyway. And so I'm not convinced that there are special conditions that distinguish it. But they are, I don't think there's been a clear link established that these special conditions rise to the level that the ordinance requirement for number of residence buildings needs to be waived in order to enjoy the property. I don't think that's there. I think that there is still a relationship between the purposes of the ordinance, as has been pointed out by other speakers, the idea of the one building. Most of these lots have that. That's one of the essential characteristics of the neighborhood, and I don't believe that we see a reason has been established that we should allow the 4 buildings on here. And clearly, I don't think there's been established the other alternative is that the property could not be reasonably used without in strict conformance with the ordinance. I think it could. I think, in fact, the attorney for the applicant noted that it could if the variances were denied. He pointed out that they could still demolish the home and they could put in another structure. So I will not be supporting a motion to approve the variance.
Would somebody like to make a motion?
I will like to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Rossi.
I would move to deny the application for variance as presented and advertised.
Is there a second? Okay, Mr. Mantle, thank you.
In order for a variance to be approved, it must satisfy all of the criteria that we normally go through. In order for it to be denied, it must only fail on one criterion, and therefore there is no reason to go through all of them. I would just point out that we have, I believe, a consensus on the board that this proposal is not consistent with the characteristics of the neighborhood, and that it would, in fact, alter the fundamental characteristics of the neighborhood, and therefore is denied on that basis. And so then that's 10.2, 3321, and 22.
Does the second have anything to add?
I would add that it also fails the hardships test, which is 10.233.25.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
That was just an aside.
Oh, okay.
Is there any further discussion? Yes, Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will support the motion as was indicated. I would just add, I do think the spirit, we do combine the first 2 elements of spirit of the ordinance and the characteristics of the neighborhood. I do think the spirit of the ordinance really, there's a reason why we say 1 dwelling unit, and we need to be very careful about allowing exceptions, and especially with the general, just put them in the 4 corners. I think that really goes up against what we are trying to accomplish with that aspect of our zoning ordinance. I know the applicant has made an argument that, hey, there's already a second, separate structure on the property, but that structure is way to the back end of the property, is very modest in size. Yes, has a very small nonconformance with the setback, but it is markedly different than what is being proposed by the applicant.
If there is no further discussion, then I want to remind you that a yes vote means that this petition is denied. Okay? So, Ms. Record.
Yes.
Mr. Neese.
Yes.
Mr. Mantle.
Yes.
Mr. Ram.
Yes.
Mr. Rossi.
Yes.
Mr. Mattson.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. And I want to thank Victoria Willingham and Robert Bowser for their patience. The request of Victoria Willingham and Robert Bowser, owners, for property located at 692 State Street, whereas relief is needed for the following. Variance from section 10.515.14 to install a mechanical unit 3 feet from the side property line, whereas 10 is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 137, Lot 6, and lies within the General Residency District. Welcome.
Sure. I think I've forgotten what I was here for. My name's Bob Bowser. I live at 692 State Street. I've lived there for a long time. I'm trying to put a standby generator in my yard. The lots in my area, as you would imagine in that neighborhood, are the houses are all built nearly to the property line. On one side, we have a 1 foot, I think the building is 1 foot off the property line, and the other side is 3 feet off the property line. When I looked at where to put this standby generator, there's really only one really good location. That is against the house. It's behind the house. Because the buildings are so close to each other, you can't really put it between the buildings. I'd have to put it on someone else's property, probably to do that. So it has to be behind the house. There's only one spot that really meets the safety guidelines, where there is no open windows, and that happens to be about 3 feet from the fence between me and the building next door, which is a funeral home. I was going to say this location is also desirable because it can't be seen by either the funeral home or the residents on the other side, because on one side it's shielded by a fence, and on the other side it's shielded by steps, granite steps. I have asked my neighbor on one side. I knew he wouldn't care, but I did go ahead and ask them, the person who owns the funeral home. They don't care. They won't be able to see it or hear it, so it doesn't matter to them at all. The only other way I could meet the intent of the ordinance and make it 10 feet away is kind of put it in the middle of my yard. And I would have to, that would be very visible to me, very visible to my neighbor. One side of my house has a ton of windows on it. They kind of see my yard more than I see it. So it would just be an aesthetic issue. And I'd have to run underground gas and electric. To connect it to the house would also be an economic issue. In terms of the zoning criteria, I don't think this is contrary to the public interest. I think the location that I'm asking for is actually better for my neighbors than any other location that would be compliant. This wouldn't have any impact on the property values in the neighborhood. And literal enforcement would have a hardship. It would mean it would cost more money, and I really wouldn't want it in the middle of my yard. I don't think I had anything else I necessarily wanted to say. I know it's late.
Let's see if anyone has questions. Are
If
there
you have
any
some questions about it, I'm more than willing to answer it.
No. I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, come on now, don't let me.
Public comment, yeah. Public
Is there
hearing?
anyone in the public who would like to speak to this petition? Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in opposition? Okay. Seeing nobody in the room.
I would like to make a motion.
Excuse me?
I would like to make a motion.
Please do.
I move to approve the variance application as presented and advertised.
Is there a second? Mr. Mantle will second me.
With regard to the public interest, the proposed location for the installation of the generator is behind the residence. It is not observable from the street, and nor will it be able to be heard from the street. So there is no public interest to be had by denying the application for this variance. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. Having this generator located behind the home does not really cost the public anything, so there is no loss to the public to be considered as a counterbalance to the loss to the owner of the property should this variance be denied. Therefore, substantial justice is done by approving the variance. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. The applicant has taken the time to speak with his nearest neighbor that would be closest to the generator, and we have communication from that neighbor that this is not problematic for them, and I take that as evidence that the nearby property owner sees no diminution in the value of their property by the installation of this generator. Literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. The hardship of the property is the narrow and deep nature of the lot combined with the location of the house. There are certain safety considerations which the applicant has enumerated with regard to the location of a generator. It makes no sense to put the generator in the middle of the yard far away from the house. Nobody does that. It would be very unusual to locate the generator there. Therefore, by the shape of the house where the windows are located, where the ingress and egress is located, and its location relative to the property lines. Those are the special conditions which weigh in favor of approving this application and locating the generator in this particular spot.
Does the second have anything to add?
Just a little bit. I mean, the applicants, we see these applications all the time, especially, you know, for one side of the yard, the other side of the yard, we have we have a 10-foot setback, and they're already at 3 feet, and it just fits right there. This applicant, on the other hand, has put it at the back of his house. Granted, it's still right next to the other person, but it's not in any of those light and air areas. And I gotta give him credit. He's sacrificing his backyard, where most of the applications we've seen, this generator or HVAC unit is as far away from their enjoyment area as possible. So I will support the motion.
Good. Is there any further discussion? Okay, then we will vote. Ms. Reckon?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Manna?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson? Yes. And the chair votes yes. So you are approved.
Very much.
Is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Can I ask?